Prateek, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
I'm good, Ashu. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Prateek. This is an important conversation, and I've actually been looking forward to this conversation. And largely because, you're kind of disrupting the EV space, right? You're essentially coming in as a very dependable and a credible partner for many of the e-commerce companies. And, we've seen the surge that has happened in e-commerce, right? And I think e-commerce, the good part is that, this surge that we've seen, and because of, say, the health concerns and, the global discussions that are happening on environment, right, and the sensitivity and sustainability, all of these dialogues that are happening, I think is bringing in a certain sensitivity, right, even in a developing market like India, where usually environment takes a backseat, right, in the rush of building things, right. But EVs has become, come at the center stage, right, and also in the commercial zone, right, where the adoption is becoming so much more prominent, right. And you are, like I said, right, empowering a lot of these e-commerce companies to you know deliver or create that last mile infrastructure through an EV support system that you've built, right? And you possibly the largest in the category. Thus, my excitement, of course, is very, very high, right? In that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks Ashu for having me here. So yes, so basically, yes, there's been a lot of dialogue about EV and the
Right.
overall space is going, and there's a lot of focus towards ESG, environmental, social governance,
Right.
overall as a space. So see, we are trying to play our role as a second generation and as a new gen. We really wanted to deliver something which
Right.
is greener, low carbon mobility, sustainable for the future,
Right.
right? So EV was the right set of disruption that we wanted to introduce.
Hmm.
Primarily, we've been as my own personal journey. I've been a part of the logistics sector for more than the last 7 to 8 years.
Right.
Handling fleet management and vehicle management side of the business.
Right.
And my family is deeply rooted into the logistics sector for more than 35 years now.
Wow.
So, you see, overall, we understand the space very well.
Right.
And it requires a lot of modification because the country is growing really fast. We are trying to match up those standards which are introduced in the West right now.
Right.
So I'm sure you recently heard about a company with grocers doing 10-minute grocery deliveries and
Right.
all this. So all this, and it is also parallelly started in the West by companies like Jocker, who have
Right.
been very aggressive in the US, doing 10-minute grocery deliveries.
Right.
So we are basically at par, in the global
Interesting.
scenario right now.
Right.
And with startups like Zyngo, we are trying to mitigate that gap. We're trying to
Right.
cut down those operational losses. The efficiency that are needed. To basically deliver the products on time. To
Super.
have that ease of business. So we are trying to bridge that gap. And EV is just like a technological disruption for us because we are
Right.
right now, we are sustainable. So we are bringing immense, carbon emissions and under control because
Right.
you're doing the electrification of the IC vehicles.
Right.
So that is the overall vision and idea, before starting Zyngo.
Interesting. Prateek, we're going to be talking about a lot of that, right? I think there's some very interesting points that we're going to cover through the course of this conversation, right? And like I said, and something that you kind of corroborated. I think EVs are here to stay, and that's a more sensible way to sort of have a sustainable ecosystem and an environment-friendly ecosystem. I think that's possibly what we're going to pass on to the future generations, and it's so much more important right now with what we are kind of experiencing, especially up north, right? I think these are seasons that I think the realization is just so much more deeper with what we experience. Prateek, before we dive into our conversation, right, around you building Zyngo and and so many other things that you're doing around it, right, and how you kind of cracking that entire the complexity around creating this infrastructure. Why don't you take us through your journey, right? I mean, you're a second generation entrepreneur. You've kind of dirtied your hands in a certain form and way, right? In your business, right? About your education. I think that'll be a good starting point.
Yeah. So thanks for that, Ashu. So basically, about my personal journey, by qualification, I'm a mechanical engineer and I'm an MBA. So I did my MBA from SPJ in Mumbai.
Right.
So basically, for the last 7 to 8 years, I was into the logistics sector,
Right.
primarily looking after the fleet management and vehicle management side of the business.
Right.
So I have got an opportunity to work with some excellent companies, like in the logistics sector, like TCI, Gati, Safe Express,
Right.
handling their AMC services, maintenance, providing them tire solutions, battery
Right.
solutions,
Right.
all these things. So
Mhm.
I've been a part of my family business for so far.
Right.
And as a second generation, I really wanted to start something of my own. So and currently, as you rightly mentioned, that every day you wake up, especially in the north, you're hearing about AQI, air quality index, air is going poorer. So as a second generation, I always think that, one should be definitely doing something which is more futuristic, at least have a 10-year heads up for that. So while starting Zyngo, my core competency lies into the logistics sector.
Right.
So we wanted to basically target, and as I studied and deep dived into the logistics sector, so I could foresee that last mile was one of the most important pain points.
Right.
And it was a very far growing and dependable sector because e-commerce was on a boom in India,
Right.
and for the last 7 to 8 years, they have been deeply penetrating into tier 2 and tier 3 markets.
Right.
Also, with this COVID situation coming up, it was like a snowballing effect for us,
right,
because more and more people started to depend upon all these last mile deliveries.
Right.
So here, as Zyngo, we played a really essential role. So in our journey, we really wanted to basically start and bring out that EV disruption into this space because it was cost effective. And we thought it was like something of a future where we are even cutting down the carbon mobility and basically the carbon emissions, and also bringing down the cost for these e-commerce players. Parallelly, we were also trying to build a technological platform which gives us more visibility to the client, to the end user, and more dependence, that when an end user is expecting a grocery or a food item or an e-commerce item to be delivered within the same day or within just 2 hours, we can make it happen. We can make it possible. So that has been the journey so far. And, when we were even opting out for the name Zyngo, so why we particularly chose Zyngo is because Zyngo is inspired from a Greek word, which means a great concept or a good idea. So that is how we picked up this name for the company.
Interesting. That's an interesting name, right? And I think more importantly, it's a name which resonates with celebration, right? While of course that's not what it means, but when I heard of the name first, right, it just meant some sort of a celebration, right? Exuberance, right? Excitement. I think there are many of those positive connotations with the name. I think I'm going to move into the business side discussion of our in our conversation, right? And I want to understand the construct of Zyngo, right? How are you positioning yourself? Infrastructure, for example, the entities that you work with. So, for example, TCI and Gati, and there are many other players, right, in that zone. While of course a lot of them are going to qualify as larger logistics players. What I want to understand is, where do you stand in your journey on Zyngo, right? What's the construct of it, right? So, for example, a lot of these guys have become essentially aggregators, right? So what they're doing is they're all essentially tech layers, where there is a provider and then there is a user, and they kind of make the match, right? In Zyngo, you're kind of cutting it differently, right? There's a certain infrastructure layer that you created, right? So with vehicles, with support staff, right?
Yeah. So yes, basically, I'll just start this touch upon this topic with first the business model. What is basically the business model, that how we are constructing Zyngo. So on one part, see, on the demand side, Zyngo has essentially become a last mile logistics service provider as a 3PL player and a dedicated service partner to all the e-commerce companies. So we are facilitated and we are having direct contracts with all the top-notch companies in India, and we are keep on adding more and more companies to our forum. All these big players like Amazon, JioMart, Flipkart. So all these players are in our kitty right now. So we showed them the feasibility of how feasible it is for basically starting the same last mile logistics on the basis of electric vehicles. Although they were definitely exploring the space themselves, because it's going to have a lot of advantages for them. The prime advantages for them were cost saving, 35% cheaper. Electric vehicles are 35% cheaper compared to ICs. Then secondly, basically, there are lesser regulatory restrictions. Electric vehicles can propel 24 hours a day. So all the grocery formats, all the food tech companies, they are more primarily focused on EVs because there are lesser regulatory restrictions. And in a tertiary manner, it comes with a green tag. So you're definitely doing something sustainable for the society as well, right? It's definitely creating an impact. So coming on the supply side of our business, so what we primarily did were we are a completely asset light company. Okay, so our business model allowed us to directly, collaborate with a lot of enablers. So on the supply side, we started collaborations with the OEMs, who are manufacturing electric vehicles, 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers. So they right now, even in that space, they were definitely requiring something of a bridge, like some company like us, because directly when they were manufacturing these EVs, there were not many takers. Right now, in the overall space, the overall EV space in a very nascent stage right now. So there was somebody that was required into the market who could demonstrate the commercial viability and the usage of these products, right? So Zyngo played that role. Zyngo bridged that gap between demand and supply. We try to take the complete operations and management under our forum through our tech stack. So we were basically providing skilled and trained manpower, gig workers to the e-commerce companies, along with electric vehicles. And while we were supplying the electric vehicles, we were also parallelly creating the ecosystem that was required for a strategic deployment plan. We collaborated with a lot of charging infra companies, enablers, and we had guided them to set up the infrastructure in those areas strategically in geographies where basically they have a use case scenario. So that is the whole construct. And if you talk in comparison to these big pure play aggregators, so see why we particularly chose last mile was because all these bigger companies, be it was TCI, Gati, Safe Express, or Delivery, they were more focused into the line haul operations. So a prime journey of a delivery of a product is broadly divided into 4 categories: first mile, mid mile, line haul, and last mile. Last mile alone itself constitutes 45% of the entire cost of delivery for the product. And this was one area which was completely unorganized so far. Even a company as big as a Delivery or a Safe Express would always outsource, or maybe have local fleet operators, regional players, depending on and aggregating them for the last mile deliveries. So there we wanted to solve this pain point for a big e-commerce company as well as for an aggregator company.
Interesting.
So Zyngo is acting like complementary to the demand of these pure play aggregators.
Very interesting. I think you've continued to highlight the cost impact, right? And you kind of alluded to it that there's a 35% more efficiency, right, when it comes to say cost, right? Tell me a little more about that, right? I mean, how are you when you say 35%, right? How do you break it down, right? I mean, are you talking about the capex that is involved plus the operating cost, or are you only referring to the operating cost around this particular bit, right? Also, tell me, what's for example, when you talk about a petrol or a diesel vehicle, right? You're essentially talking about a certain percentage of or certain rupee going into say maintenance, for example, right? And that adds to the overall cost of operations, right? And that's essentially how you kind of break it down from an operation standpoint, right? How does it play out here, right? What is, for example, what is the requirement of maintenance in this entire thing, right? I mean, is it as robust as, for example, the kind of frameworks that we've established over a period in very typical logistics play, or is there something which is still there are gaps, right? Of course, I'll have a separate question on infrastructure, which is on the charging infrastructure and so on and so forth, right? But here I'm focusing more on the repairability, and basically consistency around making vehicles available, right? That's essentially what I mean.
Yeah. So basically, I'll first start with the cost analysis part and the comparative there. So overall, when you compare an electric vehicle with a fossil fuel or an ICE vehicle, so there's a huge disparity in terms of the TCO, the total cost of ownership. So how any fleet management or a fleet operation company would basically analyze the complete in the complete life cycle of that product, what will be the entire TCO? So although, yes, I would say, especially when you compare with two-wheelers and three-wheelers, definitely the cost of ownership has some kind of a disparity when you're buying an electric vehicle or an IC vehicle. But that disparity has also been bridged by the government of India, because they are subsidizing these vehicles to a marginal extent. So all these subsidies are definitely helping in bringing the initial cost or the capex that is involved to acquire these vehicles kind of at par when you're buying an IC vehicle, So that is one such on the initial cost part. Secondly, when you talk about the operating cost, so an operating cost is definitely much higher as compared to that of an IC vis-a-vis an EV. So on a normal diesel vehicle, especially into the commercial operations, would anywhere roughly cost around 5 to 6 rupees a kilometer. Whereas an electric vehicle would not cost more than 1.5 to 2 rupees a kilometer in the overall cost of operations. So that is definitely a huge impact, which we're trying to significantly make. Also, what we, as a logistics player, what we valued is basically what kind of an impact we are creating for our gig workers, for the blue collar staff that are working, for all the drivers that we are working for, because they are one of the most essential part of the last mile space, right? So we could always foresee that, in the primitive, in the conventional practice, all the commercial vehicles was basically ridden by two people. One would be a helper category guy, and one would basically drive the vehicle. So we tried to create a disruption there, and we basically introduced the DCD model, the driver come delivery associate. So this guy is basically riding. Of course, in two-wheelers, it was always this way, but especially when you talk about three-wheelers or four-wheelers, it was a different scenario. So we tried a disruption there because we introduced the DCD model, that all the driver is just going to deliver the vehicle as well as is going to basically deliver the products to the end user. So we try to make the drivers smart, giving them smartphones, giving them the good training that is required. So all this is a part of our competitive moat that we have created. All these are entry barriers that any player with a very, very, very deep pockets also would not basically rationalize the market somehow, because we are so deeply rooted into the system, right from basically organizing the charging station for the vehicle, which we'll definitely talk about more in detail in the further questions. But yes, as you say, the total cost of ownership is definitely a very big factor. And secondly, when you talk about the maintenance part, so if you basically compare, other than the mechanical parts which are common for both the kind of vehicles, like brakes, tires, tubes, and etc. Rest of the components are very, very less. There will be less, like 50 to 60% components which are lesser as compared to that of an IC. There is no engine, there are no ignition switches, there's nothing like that, no air filters or all. So all that lesser involvement of parts, there's just one, which is a powertrain. And the kind of companies that are developing this powertrain are giving logistic companies like us the bandwidth, like the lithium ion batteries come under a 5-year warranty, right? And the powertrain has a 1 year or a 2-year warranty, which are being manufactured in India right now, because there's a lot of push by the government. Earlier, they were just rightly being imported from global countries. So right now, when the in-house manufacturing has started to happen, the cost of components is being reduced. The warranties and the guarantees are basically being more improvised. And this is always keep on bringing down the maintenance cost, although it is much, much lesser compared to that of a diesel vehicle. And when you talk about the overall life of the vehicle, I think as per the government norms, an electric vehicle is allowed to run for 15 years. So that is definitely a significant approach, that if you're maintaining your vehicle well, and even if you have to change your lithium-ion batteries after every 6 to 7 years down the line, still the total cost of ownership would come down lesser compared to normal ICs.
Very interesting. So, Prateek, we're going to talk more about the charging infrastructure, right? And there are a lot of those challenges, right? Because it's a very inconsistent environment, right? But before I do that, I would love to understand the scale at which you're operating, right? So currently, what are the numbers that you are doing across, say, all of your partnerships? So one, of course, a subset of that question is, who are the key partners that you're working with, right? And you could possibly highlight that with percentages of, work that you're doing, right, out of your infrastructure which you've built. And second is, overall numbers, right? How many cities are you present in right now? What are the kind of, say, between, say, 3-wheelers, 2-wheelers, right? How is that split? Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah. So see, definitely that's the right thing to approach right now, because see, numbers define what we have been doing so far.
Sure.
And we are still in a startup journey right now, and we are still focusing more on our productivity levels and our services. We keep on improvising those standards. But yes, so far the numbers look very promising for us, because in the last 1 year, in the last 12 months, Zyngo has been growing at a 5.6x in terms of revenue. So that is like almost a 6x growth in terms of the revenue that we are making on a monthly basis. And when you talk about the clients, so first of all, our main focus was to basically add on the big four, because see, I'll basically split how we are basically positioned into the market. So we are a hyper local company, and hyper local constitutes of two broad categories. One is e-grocery and one is food tech. So food tech we did not touch upon until unless we just recently started the 2-wheeler segment, because earlier in 3-wheeler it was not that popular. And and we were more focused on e-grocery, because that is our anchor category. Currently we are doing 80% of the e-grocery business in terms of the 100% volume that we have.
Interesting.
Okay, and in the e-grocery we are one of the most significant players in the market, because we are tied up with all the big brands. If you talk about Big Basket, if you talk about JioMart, if you talk about Amazon UFF Ultra Fast and Fresh model, which is the Amazon grocery, and then Flipkart grocery. And even we are doing the 10-minute groceries deliveries for grocers as well. So we are a substantial player in the e-grocery sector. And e-grocery it's with its own nuances, which I would definitely brush upon a little after. So if you talk about numbers, last month in Delhi NCR, Zyngo handled 47% business of Amazon grocery, 47% business of them, right? So that constitutes to almost 18 to 20% business overall that we did in terms of the e-grocery category. So we have basically more than out of the 400 vehicles that we have deployed across India, and Delhi NCR is the main focus area right now, but we are still present into 10 more cities. So we are basically propelling our journey and moving towards metropolitan and tier 1 cities right now. So this is basically the fact here that, right now in the last month, we did 222,000 deliveries on a monthly basis. So that was the kind of significant deliveries, and that too we've saved almost millions and millions of tons of carbon emissions so far,
Interesting.
because the vehicles are aggressively propelling into the market.
Very interesting. Prateek, I think no conversation can actually go out without without talking of asset sweat, right? What are the asset sweat numbers? I mean, what is the consistency of usage, right? What's the the availability of vehicle, right? What is the kind of churn? Tell me a little more about that, right? Because I'm sure that has a very, very significant effect on the overall costing, right? And I actually want to come to that, right? In terms of your ability to price better, because of the efficiency that you're able to bring in, because that's very, very consistent, right? Many other companies have essentially only cracked that, right, to go out and build very large, substantially relevant models, right? So I want to understand a little about that, right? How are you doing that? Right? What is the downtime in the process, right? Tell me a little more about how are you engineering that at your backend?
Yeah, so that is an interesting question, and that is definitely defines who we are primarily, Ashu. Because see, what we did was, see, we are not innovators here. We did not invent any product. We did not create any infrastructure out there. So
Right.
we are just like a very professional service provider, as well as we are trying to build in a very efficient operations mechanism for the last mile journey of any product. So what we primarily did was, we did not waste any of our energy into basically acquiring a product or studying the product. So we are a brand agnostic company. We are rightly going after those products in the market which are basically being established by bigger brands, bigger players in the market. So that is how, when you talk about the supply side, we essentially partnered and went ahead with companies like Piaggio, Mahindra, Kinetic Green, Hero Electric, who are already the pioneers into the industry, and they're definitely making a significant mark by bringing on the best and the most cutting edge technology into the market. And we're even open to a lot of startups, who have come and introduced their products like Omega Siki, Alti Green, Euler Motors, So we are happy to try their products as well. So that is where we don't stand any competition with any of these players. Secondly, coming to what we're trying to build out here is, so our focus lies on the operation side of the business. So when you talk about last mile, we have developed an in-house tech system and a driver mobile application, which is well integrated with the customers also we are working with. So with this interface, we are trying to basically meet out those lags in the operation side. So whether and when a Grofers or a customer to Grofers is expecting a 10-minute delivery, we are trying to build that ecosystem using EVs, that it is feasible to do a 10-minute delivery. So we try to become those enablers. Like in Amazon, what we did was, we have achieved a significant mark here, because we were the first company that is running 18 hours of Amazon grocery operations on a single electric vehicle. Right?
Interesting.
So we have deployed the complete fleet of more than 65 plus vehicles right now, all of them being 3-wheelers, having 2 drivers on one vehicle and running 18 hours flat. So our focus and competency lies into sweat out these assets and have the maximum utilization, right? And the tech software that we have built is basically enabling us to have a fleet utilization of more than 85% as of now.
Interesting.
And the kind of contracts and the support that we have in terms of our leasing contracts with these OEMs. So all the vehicles that we operate, all the 400 vehicles that we have, are on operating these models. So in these contracts, we are getting a lot of support from the OEMs. They are having a minimum TAT of more than 4 to 8 hours, where if any vehicle is in a downtime position, we'll be getting a support within less than 4 hours, right? So all this is basically making it possible. They are good at their part. They are having their own service network, and we are just trying to exercise that in the maximum possible manner.
Interesting. Prateek, when you talk of last mile delivery, right? Now this is one particular bit which has gone through a massive shift, right? And the fundamental cause of that is that at the end of the day, when you talk of e-commerce stores, right? Now these are essentially trading platforms, right? And they will continue to squeeze out as much cost as possible, right? Because it's very difficult to pass on the cost to the last customer, right? End customer, right? Either you can negotiate better rates with the seller on the platform, and simultaneously, I mean, that's what their profitability is dependent on, right? Now, in an environment like the one you are in, right? When last mile started, right? A lot of these guys used to essentially get into an operating lease model, right? Where they would typically pay a certain rental for a day and an X amount of driver fee, and that's essentially how it was, right? And your asset sweat became X number of days in a month of deployment, right? That's possibly the model that is also being followed in EVs right now. The model there is the earlier model in especially food delivery now is kind of changed, right? It's now become a per per delivery pricing mechanism, right? Which is essentially all OPEX, and just so much more relevant, right? Because if it's a lean day, and India has a lot of those seasonalities and cyclicities, right? And you have lesser number of orders, you can actually kind of, you know, kind of calibrate your requirement, right? In many ways. Uh, how do you see this your relationship playing out, right? Because today possibly the infrastructure is much lesser, but it's an infrastructure which is kind of picking up fast. Of course, we'll discuss more about the challenges as we go along. But as it goes along, right? Do you think that this relationship that you have with them of an operating lease model going out of change, right? We've seen some cut downs already, right? From the pricing that was offered on a per day basis to where it stands today, we've seen some shift already there. I've had a chance of speaking with a lot of people who are not as large as Zyngo is, slightly smaller. The margins are very, very slender. They're very thin margins, right, that they're operating at. What's your take on all of these dynamics, right? Because the pressure will always be on you as these companies go along. As there's more infrastructure, they will continue to reduce. They'll continue to change models, and they'll continue to reduce, the prices that they pay for a certain activity, right? How do you factor in that risk which lies in this model where you've created this kind of infrastructure? How do you see it going forward?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right there, Ashu. See, my margins are pretty slender out here, but see, right now what we are facing is a big transition that is
Mhm.
happening. So kind of we companies right now in the current space, when there are a lot of bottlenecks in terms of charging infrastructure, there are
Right.
not many players like the new age EV companies that are really coming up in the market right now.
Right.
So in this space, currently we are taking an advantage out here.
Right.
We are definitely pushing, and as you rightly mentioned, that all these big e-commerce companies and e-grocery companies, they are only more focused to work on a per order or a per shipment basis models,
Right.
right? And we are most flexible with that, because that model is only be significantly successful because when you are having an optimum efficiency in your
Right.
operations,
Uh-huh.
then only you will be able to make and cut down your costs. So in that, how we play a very, very important and essential role is that, see, we are basically much prepared as a player,
Right.
because we are a hardcore logistics company. So our operations and our management purview is only into making a day's operations profitable,
Right.
and also increasing the capacity of utilizing your assets.
Right.
Right? Maybe today we are deploying a dedicated vehicle to a dedicated customers. Our next strategy would be to cross utilize these vehicles, which we have already started.
Right.
So
Interesting.
our vehicles have already started doing morning milk deliveries for just 3 to 4 hours for maybe a specific customer, and then moving on to another customer and doing an 8 to 9 hour shift of deliveries there.
Interesting.
And as soon as the integration is going to go further, the network is going to go it's going to build more and more, and we will also have a quantum of relationship with all these players.
Right.
Definitely sooner or later the time will come that even for the last mile, as it is in line haul operations, for a
Mhm.
line haul operation, it doesn't matter that a truck is carrying a part load of an Amazon or a part load of a Flipkart,
Right.
right? So similar kind of a space is going to come up in the last mile as well,
Right.
where right now a dedicated vehicle is provided to a dedicated client. But the efficiency lies is when we have provided skilled and trained drivers on a certain pin code, and
Right.
those drivers have a certain kind of a KPI in terms of those pin codes in those
Right.
areas.
Mhm.
So why not that skilled manpower should be utilized by all the players?
Very interesting.
Those drivers should be utilized by a player, a food tech player who needs them in the evening hours by a Zomato, and they should even be utilized by a milk delivery player like a Country Delight or maybe a Mother Dairy or a milk run company, Milk Basket,
Right.
in the morning wee hours.
Right.
So that asset is the most important key here, and we are basically trying to build and polish these assets.
Interesting.
And with our technological stack, we are basically giving these assets and these drivers all the key essentials like
Mhm.
charging infra, like tech, route optimization,
Right.
better planning of their vehicles. So
Mhm.
this is the way basically the whole ecosystem is playing the role, and we are much more efficient compared to
Right.
the primitive and the conventional model.
Interesting. But I think, also, of course, while you're making the point that you were, right, in my mind, I'm also thinking, right, that if I'm an e-commerce company, right, I have to have a certain consistency, right? I'll have to have certain asset. Do you think, the fears that I highlighted, right, something that we've experienced, say, in food deliveries, right, where they've kind of democratized it, right? There are people who can switch on, switch off, right, be available for a certain time and go out and deliver and they get paid, right? When it comes to, the kind of delivery, say in a grocery space and other pieces, right? They will need consistency in infrastructure. Maybe it could be much lesser than possibly what they are kind of engaging right now, but they will have to have certain consistency, right? So my fears could possibly be not necessarily as as significant, right? These companies will essentially find out, the e-commerce companies will essentially find out a midway somewhere where they have base infrastructure which continues to be available all the time, right? So that the experience at the consumer's end doesn't necessarily end, which essentially means that the pressure on you is going to be lesser, right? Do you think that's essentially how it's going to play out? Even while there's infrastructure which gets built, they will still have some basic engagement going, right? Which is essentially a subset of the current model of operations, which is not necessarily only a single or delivery-based engagement that they'll have. What's your sense of it? Do you think that's how you see it play out, or you think that the shift is going to be fairly significant, like the one we discussed?
So, see, I'll just first of all start one of the market research that we did, prior
Sure.
to, inculcating into Zyngo. So, as per the current market stats, the e-commerce industry and especially the last mile logistics industry is valued at a $5 billion market in India,
Right.
which is expected to become a $5 billion market by 2024.
Mhm.
Also, the hyperlocal shipment volume is expected to grow 6x in the next 3 years.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so as you rightly mentioned, so in the next 3 to 4 years, we are also seeing a lot of that. All these big players, if you name
Right.
Amazon, Flipkart, so they already have their captive logistics, right? Flipkart has Instacart as one of the biggest companies for doing
Right.
handling the logistics for them. JioMart has recently acquired Grab, to take care of that. Big Basket is one of the biggest logistics platform, and now after being acquired by Tata, I'm sure all the other elements like Chroma and all the things that are associated with Tata are going to have that bandwidth, which will be delivered through Big Basket.
Sure.
So what I want to purview here is that as per the market studies, and it was basically somewhere published in WRI Raw Center or something like that. So there is a specific shift in the next 3 years. There is going to be a 12x growth in terms of these companies switching to 3PL players, and rather than having captive logistics. And if you specifically talk about hyperlocal, if you see that today, if there are almost close to almost 300 crore shipments being delivered on a daily basis, the number is expected to go up to 1200 crores in the next 3 years. So this is what is happening is, so as you rightly mentioned, I'm sure these companies will definitely come up and look for a midway, but that is how we are integrating ourselves into the system. So what we are trying to do is, when we are basically engaging in API integrations of our software with the client software, we are also helping them manage the operations way better. Until unless a stage will come that they would like to, we have also initiated that customer with a few customers in just less than a year of our operations with them. That a couple of spaces where they wanted that Prateek, why don't you create this complete into a green delivery hub? Only use your electric vehicles and 3-wheelers and 2-wheelers and just completely run the show yourself. So this was one significant customer, JioMart, that I'm talking about. And we, for one particular hub, we took over the entire last mile operations from them. So that is the end goal. I think there is no point that they should have 2 or 3 multiple vendors at a particular hub, taking care of the same operations, having that fight out in terms of number of orders, because see, it is going to be a dog's race out there eventually, that the other vendor would also ask for more number of orders for their drivers, and I'll ask to do the same. So that is not going to last forever, and it is definitely going to impact the dependency and the consistency of these players. So it is much better to basically go for a complete 3PL model where you're just outsourcing your last mile services, and Reliance is doing that very aggressively with their SDP model coming up.
Well, I think what you're also alluding to, Prateek, that it's a game of speed, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you're not necessarily going out and creating something. It's an aggregation game. It's a smart, a lot of your effort and engineering is essentially going into optimizing what you have, right? The resources that you have, and eventually the one who's going to kind of win this race is going to be with more capital and whoever is kind of grab that piece of land fastest, right? And I think that's essentially what you're possibly geared towards, right? Prateek, that automatically sort of brings me to my kind of the next question, right? Something that we've been wanting to talk of, and something which is being discussed all across, right? Is the infrastructure, right? Now, when you talk of EVs in general, right? I think one of the reasons it's kind of taken time, right, in terms of adoption. While of course efficiency is something that everybody kind of raves off, and there are modalities that are still getting worked out, right? in terms of capacity, in terms of registration, so on and so forth, right? One thing that everybody's been talking about consistently, right, across all categories is the charging infrastructure, right? Now, what is happening is that every single OEM is designing their own battery, right? Of course, while it's a lithium-ion battery, right? What that is leading into is an inconsistent charging infrastructure, right? And that's not something that people are coming to on a common ground, right? Their ability to differentiate themselves vis-a-vis the other becomes this differentiation, right? What's your sense of it? What do you make out of it, right? I mean, this is something which is very key to your overall performance, right? As a large integrator, uh, what do you make out of this, right? How do you think this could possibly be solved in future? Uh, Given we are in a fairly early stage, right? What's your sense of this?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most important topics. Whenever you talk about EVs, and it's a very clear fact, and
Right.
the overall uncertainty to this whole EV space is because of this fact that there is a significant kind of an uncertainty and not a very collective and a creative approach is being
Right.
pursued when you talk about the charging infrastructure that is built across. And I'm sure the government is doing a lot to try to basically mitigate that, trying to make lithium ion batteries here, but still, as you rightly mentioned, we need a very collective approach.
Right.
We need to have some standardizations when it comes
Mhm.
to batteries, so that new age technologies like swapping solutions, or maybe battery renting out solutions, so all this can be feasible, because we need to have certain standardizations that are
Right.
required.
Right.
So that is right now, of course, it is definitely a missing piece, and we are also yet to see how it is gonna happen, and what is going to be this journey in the next 3 to 4 years. But see how we are basically optimistic about our approaches. See, in the same space, we are also partnered, and we are having a lot of channel partners in terms of a lot of charging infra companies.
Right.
So we, as enablers into this space, especially for the last mile, we know which category of vehicle and which technology is most suited for a
Mhm.
particular operation.
Okay.
Right? For if you talk about a middle mile operation, I would
Mhm.
never ever recommend a swappable vehicle, to be deployed, because there
Okay.
you need a longer range.
Right.
So, and first of all, when we started our journey right from the customer's approach.
Mhm.
Like when we started approaching all these e-commerce players, we
Right.
significantly told them that EVs are just going to be able to do a 7 to 8 kilometer radius. That's
Right.
all.
Right.
So first of all, only we predefined the range and the area and the maneuverability of that vehicle.
Right.
Second, when we come to the charging infra part, so we are working with a lot of leading charging infra players in India, like
Mhm.
Sun Mobility,
Right.
GeoBP, and Charge Zone, Magenta, EVRE. So all these
Mhm.
players, are channel partners to us. So what we are helping out them is, see, when we say we are building an ecosystem out here, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are just going to put all the capex
Right.
investment into it.
Right.
So our significant role is that, yes, right now strategically, where should you place that infrastructure? Where
Mhm.
you have some utility to it, where you have some asset utilization to it, because it's a huge cost for these people
Right.
as well. You know,
Right.
if you talk about the basic nuances, Ashu, today also, taking an electrical connection for an EV, or for setting up an infrastructure is a very hassle job.
It's
A
painful.
very hassle job. It's
Right.
really painful. It involves a lot of cost.
Right.
Buying all those cables, doing that earthing, everything adds to the cost, right?
Right.
So as a logistics company, it is not my purview to take
Right.
care of those costs, right?
Uh-huh.
So with my significant partnership with these enablers, what we are trying to do is, see, if you have an Amazon hub in the core heart of Delhi or in
Right.
Gurgaon, right? We are basically strategically asking them to place their infrastructure, which is
Interesting.
very closer proximity to our hub of operations,
Right.
right? So anyway, they were going to build that infrastructure when they're
Right.
targeting Delhi or Gurgaon as a market, right? Or Bangalore as a market.
Mhm.
So we are basically giving them that, why don't you place an infrastructure that it is mapping these customer hubs also?
Right.
So, and also definitely wherever it is required that we need to run the show, and they are not looking to basically expand in those locations, we're
Mhm.
definitely going ahead with the captive infra. We put
Right.
our own infrastructure, we buy those assets from them, and we definitely deploy. So
Interesting.
that is how we are basically solving this problem right now. And when you talk about the driver, he should always feel ease of business.
Right.
In the morning when he's coming from his home, of course he lives nearby in that area.
Right.
That is why he has the know-how of that area, right?
Mhm.
And then he should just park his vehicle, or maybe when you talk about a two-wheeler, so we are
Right.
even enabling the drivers to take the two-wheelers home.
Right.
you can charge the two-wheeler at your house as well if you want to do
Interesting.
that.
Right.
So all that flexibility is needed right now into the system.
Interesting.
And
Interesting.
with our basically we are very tech advanced, I would say, in terms of this, because of our approach is this way,
Right.
that currently 60 to 75% of our fleet is on swappable batteries. So we
Interesting.
are one of the largest players in India who are basically using swappable batteries.
Mhm.
So swapping gives us zero downtime. We
Right.
quickly swap in less than 5 minutes, and there is no range anxiety for us. We
Right.
can do 3 or 4 swaps in a day. So
Mhm.
the limitation that an electric vehicle can only run for 50 kilometers or 100 kilometers is
Right.
totally out of the play here.
Right.
So as a logistics player, we understand what kind of an operation fits what kind of a product, right?
Interesting.
And we are just matching it out.
Prateek, when we talk of EVs, right, especially in the commercial space, right, range becomes a problem, right? Something that you also alluded to, that if there's say a customer node, I'll possibly be able to cater towards 6-7 kilometers, 8 kilometers, 10 kilometers within that radius, right, of that node. Do you see a change there happening with all of, say, infrastructure improving? Do you think, and of course, the hardware, of course, the quality of hardware is also sort of improving, right? Do you think that's going to change anytime soon, and you'll be able to maintain it a lot more efficiently? Because otherwise what happens is there's the requirement of capex becomes much larger, right? Because you can only cater to just so much of distance, right? And hardware on of course putting in more vehicles, but also creating this infrastructure, right? What's your sense of it? How do you see it play out?
Yeah, so I think in the forthcoming years, it is definitely going to solve this problem, because we would definitely require fast charging solutions, multiple chargers, and when you talk about the overall infrastructure, if you see that a lot of residential societies, corporate houses,
Right.
government buildings, they also start coming up with that EV infrastructure. So
Right.
even if a driver is maybe stopping by for a smoke, or maybe he's just stopping by for a lunchtime, so he can quickly tap his vehicle and just start the charging.
Right.
So definitely we need immense infrastructure. The kind of scale that we are looking to build out here, it is not going to be resolved only with just a few pieces here and there.
Right.
It requires a huge transition.
Mhm.
And I think which I earlier also touched upon, some standardization, that the charging infrastructure for a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler has to have some layers of common,
Right.
it has to be some common layers into it, right? So that if the government is spending a huge amount, to build a charging infrastructure or charging station for two-wheelers and four-wheelers, and it should accommodate three-wheelers as well and two-wheelers
Right.
as well. So
Mhm.
it should have a complete bandwidth. That is what I mean, right? And definitely, you see, yeah, a lot of things are coming up. It's very fast. Things are
Right.
changing really fast
Right.
out here in the EV space. So
Right.
I'm really optimistic. I'm sure with better fast charging solutions, with better this, even these problems can be mitigated.
Interesting. Prateek, I mean, tier two is picking up in a phenomenal way, right? I think I think e-commerce companies would have never anticipated the kind of rush that they saw in the last 1.5 years, right? COVID has been unreal. The demand for products has gone up, aspiration has gone up. There is liquidity, and when I say liquidity, that's basically financing, right? More and more financing options have come up, right? Now, all of that put together is something that you also alluded to, right? That you're looking at a 6x growth, right? When it comes to hyperlocal deliveries, right? Tier two is picking up in a phenomenal way, right? And a lot of these companies essentially started to look at creating EV focused delivery infrastructure in tier two, tier three cities. How do you see that play out, right? And what's your role in that? Are you looking at some of those markets?
Yes, absolutely. So how we have positioned ourselves is, see, last year was basically a built-up year, where we wanted to basically have the complete attention of these players and become a significant logistic partner to all
Right.
these companies, and give and showcase the confidence and strength to them that yes, we are able to do this and maintain those same standards of services by using electric vehicles.
Right.
So that part is done and dusted for us now. Moving ahead, definitely we are trying to basically bridge the gap, that whenever these companies are moving into a tier 2 or tier 3 city, we are just taking the complete last mile as an outsource service to them.
Right.
We would help them that they are scouting for a new warehouse, from where the operations are going to run. So while they are parallelly building a warehouse for themselves, or maybe any other outsourced partner who is doing it for them, we are parallelly making that warehouse equipped with all the right set of infrastructure that is
Right.
needed,
Mhm.
and that too not on their cost, on our cost,
Right.
because we definitely have that bandwidth to take care of that part, right?
Right.
And completely from the day one, we are giving them that solution, that
Mhm.
last mile is not going to be a challenge for you. We
Right.
will plan how many two-wheelers, how many three-wheelers are sufficient to make that kind of a
Interesting.
load. So if they're having 1,000 shipment load per day, so we
Mhm.
plan that infrastructure, we plan the kind of logistics that is required
Right.
always to mitigate that. So that is definitely the focus. And yes, as significantly, if you talk about metros and tier one, since the network is building, the demand is growing here very
Right.
rapidly. But in tier two and tier three, we are directly going ahead and making them equipped with a complete outsourced 3PL or a 4PL solution.
Right. Very interesting. I think you in a way answered my next question, right? But I'll still go on to ask you this question, right? And in a more numeric form, what are the next 2 years like, right? I would have loved to ask you a 5-year question, but I think we're just in very dynamic times, right? Asking a 5-year question is not correct. I think that also gives us an opportunity to come back and kind of revisit your the milestones that you've set out for yourself. But what are the next 2 years like, right? What are the numbers that you're chasing? What are the milestones that you're chasing?
So we've significantly carved out two bigger milestones that we are
Mhm.
running after right now.
Right.
So one is in the next quarter, in before we are closing this financial year, we are targeting mission 1,000, a
Mhm.
1,000+ vehicle
Very
fleet
interesting.
on our platform,
Right.
and doing last mile deliveries. We are targeting close to almost reaching 10 lakh to 15 lakh deliveries on a monthly basis.
Right.
Okay, that is the first milestone that we're trying to achieve.
Mhm.
Second, but we are the only bottleneck that we are facing here is that we do have the demand, we do have the confidence of the market, and we don't even foresee EV infrastructure as anymore a
Right.
bottleneck now. The
Right.
only thing is there are supply chain snags, which we all know that the automobile industry is going on with the chip
Right.
shortage and other things. So there is a 60 to 90 days in terms of supplies, that is a
Right.
tat that we are expecting. So that is how inculcating more and more vehicles is still getting them in hand is still a challenge. But
Interesting.
yes, if I think in the coming year, for March 20, so for FY24, the target would be that we have 10,000 vehicles deployed under our platform. So that is the
Fantastic.
plan for the next 2 years.
Fantastic. And these are going to be largely cell phone vehicles, or will you also be bringing in a lot of these smaller players, right, with 10, 15, 20, 30 vehicles, right, under your umbrella? What's the plan on that?
Yeah. So in terms of the vehicle side, we have primarily three models.
Uh-huh.
One is the standard business model that we started our journey with, where we are
Right.
taking the vehicles on lease, which are basically managed as our own assets through
Right.
us, and we keep a specific driver on a payroll on that vehicle. Second is that we have collaborated with a lot of fintech companies.
Mhm.
So see, today we also definitely want to be a part of the aggregation business, because
Right.
but right now it is not possible because
Mhm.
not many people own electric vehicles.
Right.
But with the significant approach, with clearing those deep thoughts in the minds of
Right.
a driver or a logistic player, that EV is a challenge, it will be a hassle, it will
Right.
be a bottleneck. So that is the things that is basically harming them, to
Uh-huh.
stepping into this space, right? So we are basically trying to mitigate those bottlenecks there. So right now we have also introduced the DCO model in
Mhm.
our fleet expansion. So a DCO is a driver come owner model, where
Right.
to a lot of drivers, who want to own two-wheelers and three-wheelers, we are giving them a guaranteed minimum business guarantee for the next three
Interesting.
years or 4 years, till the
Right.
time the vehicle is under the EMI period, what you call.
Right.
And we are also giving them flexible financing options with a lot of
Right.
tie-ups with fintech companies. So
Uh-huh.
that is one kind of an impact which we are trying to create, and create some kind of an awareness in the market that it is not
Super.
really hard to own an electric vehicle anymore. And
Right.
we are giving them the business guarantee also, that Zyngo's
Right.
platform is going to ensure that your vehicle is up and running, you have the right set of infrastructure available to you, and the right client available to you for always.
Interesting.
So
I think
yeah.
phenomenal, right? My second last question in our conversation today. Uh, there are a lot of these companies that are getting funded, right? Of course, there are questions around the models and so on and so forth, right? But when there is a lot of money coming in, right, which is institutional money, right? The ability to go out and discount availability of an asset just becomes so much more significant and larger, right? Which essentially means that for many players like yourself, right, which are essentially, and not in a wrong way, but an offshoot of, say, a traditional business, a family-run business, which kind of existed, right? Um, they tend to, more than create the market, uh, create wrong expectations, right? And kind of crash the pricing. Competition is anyway increasing, right? And competition is increasing two ways. There are a lot of players who are going on creating large fleets, right? There are players who are partnering with, something that you're also doing, which with fintechs and, and kind of co-ownership models. And then there are these small fringe players which are coming up, right? 10, 15, 20 vehicles and stuff like that, right? What do you read of competition, right? How do you see yourself tackling all of what is happening in this ecosystem? Because, eventually everybody who's creating this kind of an infrastructure, small or large, is going and chasing the same set of clients that you are. What's going to be your strategy going forward tackling this?
See, as you rightly said, with a lot of money pumping into the space and a lot of people, who is betting on the fundraising money, I think times are going to be challenging and more competitive, going ahead. There is no doubt about that, and of course, all these companies, the more and more they learn about EV, the kind of knowledge and wisdom and the acquisition we have right now is going to be shared into the market as well. Sooner or later, people will have that understanding about EVs more, and even these companies, and they will start squeezing them as well. So see, right now, what is the biggest moat, I would say, and the biggest competitive advantage that we hold is like for first of all, that we have a deep understanding with these clients. It is not an easy, on a day-to-day basis, we talk with a driver or a gig worker who is just, who's not that qualified of a guy. And on the second hand, we are talking to an Amazon person, hub operations, who might be an IIT or an IIM. So we are trying to mitigate that kind of a disparity into the market. So it's not an easy job to do, to have an understanding of both these people and meeting out there, because right now an Amazon would need that driver, right? And the driver would need a company like an Amazon to work for. But, who's going to bridge this gap? Who's going to be the person, who's going to bridge this gap for these people? So that is one thing. And see, these relationship has not been so easy. You're just not going to drop down to an Amazon and say, oh, I'm offering you $50 discount on your per order basis. Now give me all your deliveries. So Amazon and the JioMart, these are such players. So in last mile, they have a lot of dependency and a credibility towards the customer. If their customers start facing delayed orders, so the kind of SLAs that they have are so damn tight. You have to have such level of focus and competency that even if with deeper pockets or with just throwing money out there into the market is not going to be a rational factor that will be sustainable.
Interesting.
So that kind of expertise we have.
Very important point that you highlighted, and I think you're taking your role very, very seriously. And I think the way you're kind of coming in as a system integrator, right, where you are helping them plan at the last mile, I think is just so much more phenomenal. I think there's a lot of I think there's a very different kind of a partnership that you're kind of building. Not a lot of people are looking at it that way. I've had the opportunity of speaking with many some founders, and of course other players who are looking at the space, who've deployed some vehicles and stuff like that, right? Not a lot of people are looking at their role at that level, at the level that you are at, right? Which is very interesting to see. I think that is a reflection of how sharply are you addressing the problem. Prateek, my last question, right? In our and this is more personal. For a family business, right? For somebody, a second generation or third generation in a family business, it's usually very, very difficult for them to, go out and get the confidence of the seniors in the family, right? You always is the son of the house or the daughter of the house, right? And they always have this, irrespective of whatever aspirations that you have, right? There's always this element of doubt, right? And it's very difficult, and you know what I mean, right? It's always difficult for them to carve out their own path, right? You've successfully done that, right? And I would want you to use this opportunity to say what are some of those things that have worked for you, right, in communicating with the seniors in the family, right, to helping you build this, supporting you build this, right? Which does not, like I said, right, not a lot of people are successful doing that. Traditional businesses tend to stick to their own practices. Second generation, third generation essentially continue to stick to the practices, right? They don't adopt newer mechanics. Not a lot of them, right? A much smaller percentage of them, and they become redundant over a period of time. You've taken a very interesting path, right? What has been your learning in the process? How do you manage that, that relationship and the possible conflict, right? And doubt and ability. How have you done that? Your take on that?
You see, this is really a very important aspect, and I think you're the first one person who has touched upon something like this, and it is really, really very important of a question, because these are life-changing moments. Honestly,
Right.
Ashu. See, I've been very blessed to have a family who's been so supportive of my initiatives and the journey that I have taken up for myself. But and it has not been possible without their support, without their blessings, that I have been able to reach so far. See,
Right.
when you talk about when you have to cast out yourself from the shadow of under the family business, under your father's legacy, that you
Right.
have been living up to. So it's really difficult. There's a lot of comfort there. I'm going to tell you, you're always secured, you're always stable.
Right.
You have the backing of your parents, your uncles, who are always there to support you if there is any challenge, and you will always lead a good life, right?
Right.
So there's no doubt about that, and there is not even harm to just even follow that path, because
Right.
it is what the family is also expecting out of you. At the end of the day, all of this is just being done for the family's sake, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, you just want to have a good meal and have a good laugh out with your family, and it's like everything is just gone. Everything is so simpler there. But what I have been always very very deep dived into that. My father is a self-made person.
Right.
He himself is a mechanical engineer, and he's always motivated me to start something of his own. His journey was definitely something that has always inspired me,
Right.
to start something of my own. And the passion I hold for logistics overall. So
Right.
when I was starting Zyngo, and step by step, you're facing a lot of challenges. All those. Whenever I used to go to an Amazon hub and say I want to be your partner, he said that you have to show some proof of concepts. Whether you are worthy enough to
Right.
become a partner to a brand like an Amazon. So all these challenges, all these nuances on a day-to-day basis, and especially the best part and the most biggest achievement today, while in whatever journey we have so far in Zyngo, is the team. We have an exceptional team out here.
Right.
People from different backgrounds, such diverse backgrounds, they have joined in, they have collated their efforts, they're putting their heart and sweat and the blood every day into this
Right.
company. So
Mhm.
when you look up to the emotions and aspirations of a lot of people, who are around you, supporting you, it makes it whole a very, very beautiful journey.
Very
It
interesting.
makes it relatable, right?
Very
Even if
interesting.
funding or no funding, even if you are, looking to have bigger aspirations, everything seems more achievable. With
Very
a significant team, with the blessings of your family, I don't think it is a challenge. But always, yes, it is very hard to take that step, from, coming out of the casting out of yourself from that shadow
right.
and of that lineage, and, starting something of your own.
Very
So
interesting.
that's difficulty.
I think, I think one thing that stands out, right, when you're answering this, right, I'm looking at that passion. Of course, I've continued to sort of look at that, the passion and the energy, right, with which you've been, kind of advocating this, right. And I think this is no different from, I think, any other founder that one comes across, right. I think that honesty and integrity is very, very important. And I think while you could, of course, have that early comfort, right, which you kind of alluded to, right, that you have your family to support you and so on and so forth, right. But beyond a certain point, if it's not successful, it's equally difficult to sort of handle them, convince them, saying that, listen, I failed for ABCD reasons, right? It's not that easy, and I can understand a lot of that, right? Prateek, this was an absolutely phenomenal conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Loved every bit of it. How I want these conversations to go on, specifically the last part, right? We could do a separate session on that completely, right? Where we talk of
Right.
the role of family and second generation, third generations, right? And this and building a business out of, say, an existing setup, right, is and the aspirations of second and third generations, right? I think it could be just so much more interesting in itself, right? But we'll save some of that for next time, Prateek. It was a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you so much. I think what you're doing is extremely impactful. I think what you're doing is, more importantly, I think it's an industry which is still coming to terms with how it's going to operate at scale. I think we're still in a very, very early phase, but I think the passion and energy with which you are evangelizing the cause of EVs across across last mile with your partners, I think, is absolutely heartening. And I think more importantly, you're very clear with your role, which stands out, and you're taking it beyond just being an asset integrator, right, or an asset provider. You're actually taking it to the next level, where you're saying you're kind of taking it up with a certain sense of ownership, right? Which is very different from what a lot of other people, the way they're solving this particular problem. Prateek, thank you so much for taking the time out. It was a pleasure to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashu. It was just lovely to have a word with you, and we'll be ecstatic to have further discussions anytime you can. You just give us your valuable time. We'll be happy to have and engage in interaction with you guys.
Look
So it was
forward, Prateek.
lovely to have this conversation. Thank you so much.
Look forward. Thank you.